Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gun was pressed cold and hard against my temple before I even heard the safety click off. I told you. A voice growled from the shadows, deep as a cavern and twice as dark, that you were hired to watch him, not to corrupt him. I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to, not with the terrifyingly massive silhouette of Silas Vane looming over me, his pheromones saturating the air with the scent of burnt cedar and ozone, the smell of a storm about to break. He was the apex predator of this city, a man who could crush corporations with a signature and lives with a whisper. But right now, his trembling hand betrayed him. He wasn't angry because I had broken his rules. He was angry because for the first time in 4 years, his son wasn't looking at him with fear. He was looking at me. It had started 3 weeks ago, on a day when the rain slashed against the glass walls of the Vane estate like shrapnel. I was the 5th nanny in 6 months. The agency called it a high-risk placement, which was polite code for the father is a tyrant and the child is a ghost. I needed the money. The debts my brother had left behind were circling like sharks, and Silas Vane's paycheck was the only lifeboat in sight. When I arrived, the house felt less like a home and more like a mausoleum constructed of black marble and steel. The staff moved in terrified silence, avoiding the eyes of the master. And then there was Leo. Leo was 6 years old, small for his age, with hair the color of spun gold, a stark contrast to his father's midnight locks. He sat in the center of the expansive living room, surrounded by expensive, unopened toys. The maids walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture. The butler spoke over his head. He does not speak. The butler, Mr. Henderson, had informed me stiffly upon my arrival. Mr. Vane does not tolerate disruptions. The boy understands he is to remain quiet. Do not encourage outbursts. He's a child, I had replied, my grip tightening on my bag. Not a statue. Henderson had just sneered. Previous staff tried to force vocalization. It ended poorly. Mr. Vane believes the boy is choosing defiance. He waits for the boy to break. That was the narrative. Silas Vane, the ruthless alpha, believed his son's silence was a power play, a stubborn refusal to submit to his authority. So, everyone ignored Leo. If they didn't acknowledge him, they couldn't be blamed for his silence. But I watched him. I watched Leo trace patterns on the frosty window pane. I watched his eyes dart toward the piano when thunder rumbled, vibrating the floorboards. I watched how he flinched not at sound, but at sudden movements. It was on the 3rd day that I found him in the library. He was reaching for a book on a shelf too high for him. He looked at the maids dusting nearby, his mouth opening slightly, but no sound came out. They didn't even glance at him. The frustration in his small face was heartbreaking, a silent scream trapped behind his teeth. I walked over, knelt on one knee, and tapped the floor to get his attention. Leo froze, his eyes widening. He expected a reprimand. Instead, I raised my hands. I tapped my chin with an open hand. Mother, I shook my head, then pointed to the book. I made the sign for book. Then please. Leo stared at my hands. His gaze was intense, hungry. I did it again. Asterisk book. Please, asterisk. Slowly, with trembling fingers, Leo mimicked the motion. His coordination was clumsy, but the intent was there. I smiled, grabbed the book, and handed it to him. The look on his face wasn't just gratitude. It was the look of a drowning man finally breaking the surface. We started in secret. The blind spots of the security cameras became our classrooms. I taught him hungry, thirsty, sad, happy. I learned that his silence wasn't defiance. It was a fortress. He had selective mutism born of trauma. The trauma of losing his mother and being raised by a father who viewed emotions as liabilities. Why sign language? I had asked myself initially. Why not just talk to him gently? Because words had been weaponized in this house. Silas used words to command, to belittle, to control. Silence was Leo's only defense. By giving him a language that required no sound, I was giving him a weapon his father couldn't confiscate. But secrets in the Vane household had a short shelf life. The confrontation happened on the night of the Vane Charity Gala. The house was swarming with elites, sharks in silk suits and vultures in diamonds. Silas needed Leo to make an appearance, to play the part of the perfect heir. Get him dressed, Silas had ordered me earlier, not even looking up from his tablet. And ensure he doesn't embarrass me. I had dressed Leo in a miniature tuxedo. He looked terrified. It's okay. I signed to him in the mirror. Asterisk, I am here. You are brave. Asterisk. Leo took a deep breath and signed back, brave. The party was suffocating. I stood by the wall, watching Silas charm investors. He was undeniably attractive, a lethal combination of rugged masculinity and aristocrat polish. But his eyes were ice. He barely glanced at his son. Leo stood by the buffet table, clutching a plate. A woman in a red dress, likely the wife of a board member, leaned down. Aren't you a darling? She cooed. What's your name, sweetie? Leo stared at her. Cat got your tongue? She laughed, a brittle sound. Or are you just rude like your father? Leo's hands twitched. He looked at me across the room. I nodded subtly. Leo set his plate down. He looked the woman in the eye, raised his hand to his forehead, and moved it away in a salute. Hello. Then he spelled, fingers flying with a dexterity we had practiced for hours, Leo. The woman blinked. Oh, is he deaf? No. A voice boomed behind her. The room went silent. Silas Vane stood there, his face a mask of thunder. He stared at his son, then at the woman, and finally, his gaze locked onto me. It was a look that promised violence. He grabbed Leo's shoulder, not roughly, but with a firmness that made the boy flinch. Go to your room. Leo looked at me, panic rising. He signed, asterisk father. Angry, asterisk. Silas saw the movement. He froze. He looked at Leo's hands, then back to my face. The realization hit him like a physical blow. Everyone out, Silas commanded, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the ballroom. Silas, we haven't even, the woman started. Get out, he roared, shattering the facade of the polite host. When the room cleared, leaving only the three of us amidst the ruins of the gala, Silas marched toward me. He backed me into the library, slamming the heavy oak doors. That was when the gun came out. I told you not to corrupt him, Silas snarled, the barrel against my temple. I told you I wanted him normal. Sign language? You think making him look disabled is helping him? He's not disabled, you arrogant prick. I snapped, adrenaline overriding my fear. He's communicating. Something he's never done with you. Silas pressed the gun harder. He has a voice. He chooses not to use it to spite me. He chooses not to use it because he's terrified of you. I shouted back. He's 6 years old, Silas. He thinks his voice is the reason his mother died. Silas went still. The color drained from his face. What did you say? I read the files. I whispered, breathless. Your wife died calling 911 during the home invasion. She was screaming. Leo was in the closet. He heard her scream, and then he heard the gunshot. He thinks sound brings death. The gun lowered slowly. Silas took a step back, his chest heaving. It was a plot hole in his own life. A piece of logic he had been too blinded by grief to see. He thought Leo's silence was a weakness inherited from a soft mother, a refusal to be an alpha. He had never considered that the boy was trying to survive in the only way his traumatized mind knew how, by being invisible. He told you that? Silas asked, his voice cracking. He signed it to me, I said softly. Last night, when the thunder woke him up. Silas turned toward the door where Leo was peeking in, tears streaming down his small face. Silas looked at his hands, hands that had built empires and destroyed rivals. Hands that had never known how to be gentle. I didn't know, Silas whispered. The monster in the suit crumbled, revealing the broken man beneath. You didn't ask, I replied. Silas dropped the gun onto the velvet armchair. He walked over to Leo. For the first time, he didn't tower over the boy. He knelt. He went all the way down to the floor, ruining his bespoke Italian trousers. He looked at Leo, tears brimming in his own obsidian eyes. Silas lifted his hands. They were large, scarred, and trembling. He looked at me, helpless. How, he rasped. How do I say? I'm sorry. I walked over, my heart hammering a rhythm that wasn't just fear anymore. It was hope. I knelt beside them, bridging the gap between the wolf and his cub. I guided Silas's hand. I formed his fingers into a fist and rubbed it in a circle over his heart. Sorry. Silas mimicked the motion, staring intensely at his son. Sorry. Leo hiccuped. Then, slowly, he raised his small hand. He pointed to Silas, then brought his hands together, interlocking his fingers. Family. Silas let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh, and pulled Leo into his chest. It was the first time I had seen him hug his son. Leo buried his face in his father's neck, clutching the silk of his lapel. I stood up to leave, to give them their moment, but a hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Silas didn't let go of Leo, but he looked up at me. The ice in his eyes had melted, leaving behind a scorching, liquid heat. "Don't go," Silas commanded. It wasn't a roar this time. It was a plea. The dynamic of the house shifted overnight. The silence was no longer heavy. It was comfortable. I stayed, not just as a tutor, but as a translator. And, increasingly, as something more. Silas was a man of extremes. When he ignored Leo, he had done so completely. Now that he was learning to connect, he attacked it with the same ferocity he applied to a hostile takeover. He demanded lessons every night. Again, he would growl, sitting across from me in the library, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded with muscle. The firelight danced on his skin. "Your thumb is wrong," I corrected, reaching out to adjust his grip. When my skin touched his, the air in the room grew heavy. Static electricity seemed to arc between us. Silas didn't pull away. He turned his hand, interlacing his fingers with mine. "Teach me," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "How to say I want you." My breath hitched. "Silas, tell me, Julian." He pulled me closer, his eyes dark with intent. Everyone ignored him. Everyone ignored me, the man behind the money. "You saw us both." I saw a man who needed to shut up and listen. I whispered, though my pulse was racing. "Make me listen," he challenged. He kissed me then, a searing, possessive claim that tasted of whiskey and desperation. It was a slow burn that had finally caught fire. He lifted me onto the mahogany desk, scattering papers worth millions, his hands roaming over me with a reverence he had previously reserved only for power. Months later, we were at another gala. The snow was falling outside, but inside, it was warm. Leo was there, wearing a tuxedo that matched mine. He was running around with the other children, signing furiously to a little girl who seemed enchanted by his hand movements. Silas stood beside me, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back. A rival businessman approached us, a man named Kovic, who had been trying to undermine Silas's company for years. "Vain," Kovic sneered. "I see you brought the mute and the help." The old Silas would have destroyed Kovic's stock portfolio by morning. The new Silas smiled, a predatory, dangerous smile. He looked at me, then at Leo. Silas raised his hand. He looked Kovic dead in the eye and signed, precise and sharp, "You are not worth my words." Then he turned his back on the billionaire, wrapped his arm around my waist, and led me toward the dance floor. "Did you just sign that?" I laughed, breathless. "I've been practicing," Silas smirked, pulling me flush against his hard body. "I also learned this one." He brought his hand to his lips, then moved it toward me. "Thank you." As we swayed to the music, watching Leo laugh silently across the room, I realized that in a world full of noise, we had found our own perfect frequency. And that is how the wolf learned that power doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it speaks with its hands. If you enjoyed seeing the mighty Silas Vane bow down for love, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, do you think a parent can truly be forgiven for years of emotional neglect, even if they change? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt, masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art. 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Silas, tall, broad shoulders, dark hair, sharp jawline, wearing unbuttoned tuxedo shirt, kneeling on floor, expression of vulnerability and regret, large hands signing sorry over heart. Man 2. Julian, slender, soft features, light brown hair, wearing modest cardigan and slacks, kneeling beside man 1, gently guiding man 1's hands, expression of empathy, child. Small boy, blonde hair, watching them with teary eyes. Background is dark, luxurious library, fireplace glowing, scattered papers on floor, dramatic warm lighting, cinematic composition, emotional atmosphere, intricate details.